Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms.
All right. So you've got some stories that you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
When I just have this idea in my head about how things are going to go, it's going to be so stressful and it's going to be so busy. And what if people call out all the time?
Yeah.
And what if people get mad at me and yell at me? And so I go to all the negative things, like all the bad.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to work on it where like reframing it.
Yeah.
And said, well, what if I help people? What if I help somebody? What if I change somebody's day?
Yeah.
And not doing this whole, like, it's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
All these things are happening to me and I'm a victim and for me.
Yeah. So to catch everybody up, this is talking about a shift in job, sort of like changing shifts, basically.
Going from really easy, kind of sitting around doing nothing, couple of phone calls during the night.
Yeah.
A few things to do, like a checklist basically. And, and I think I will do well, but, it's nervous and you get anxiety about it because you're worrying and thinking, will I do good?
Mm-hmm.
Will I be good? Will I
be
sane and stressed out,
So what have you been doing to, counteract the spiral of worry?
Writing it down.
Okay.
Putting words on paper.
Yeah.
Of my thoughts and really trying to shift it, and saying like, how do I flip this over on its back and be a devil's advocate?
Right.
It's not helpful to worry and to spiral.
Yeah.
Out of control.
Right. Well, and it feels so real because brain is absolutely convinced that this is the eventuality, the worst possible scenario that's going to come up, right? Yeah. And it doesn't want to look at solutions. It doesn't want to look at how amazing you are. It doesn't want to look at everything you've been through to get you to this point and, all this stuff. Like that's all ignored when brain gets in this spiral. And this isn't just like, this isn't exclusive to shifting jobs or anything like that, but like it's easy to get caught in the spiral. And I think it's awesome that you at least recognize it, right? Like, because that takes a lot.
Yeah. And I've come a long way because I used to just believe these things as facts. And it was just a fact that it was going to be terrible. And I was just going to have to live with it.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, most of the time, Katie, it wasn't that bad. Right. So.
Right. Like, brain just likes to grasp onto like the worst possible thing. And like, this is for sure.
And our ego is like, no, you're going to be right. Like, it's going to be terrible.
Yeah. And what's even worse is you start looking for all the ways that it's terrible.
Yes.
Because like brain would rather be right than comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Or look for the positive thing or try to make anything easier. It would rather be correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm very visual. So journaling is super helpful. And I have this whole idea, like, of the second mountain. So you have your first mountain, a vocation or career. You go to school, you go to college, you get the degree, you get the job. Everybody's happy. Mom's happy. Dad's happy. Grandparents are happy. Then you get up there and you're like, oh, this isn't what I feel like I should be doing. It doesn't feel right. And so then you see this other mountain that you want to climb that's more fulfilling and your passions are up there, but you got to go down the first mountain. and go down into the ravine,
Yeah.
the river of misery, and climb again. And so I'm trying to figure out a way of how I can make my ravine and my river of misery not so miserable.
Yeah.
Because I know that I have a way out.
Yep.
And the climb's going to be hard, but
yeah.
Okay.
Have you considered just allowing it to be miserable?
Yes.
I think it's the resistance to the misery that makes it worse. That's where the suffering happens.
Yeah.
Right. Like that. And I think that was a great analogy that you used of the fulfillment of like, you're finally at the peak of the one thing that you wanted to do and everybody's all proud of you. And you're like, oh, this is what my life goal was. And then you're like, oh, I want to change my mind now. And so many people are not brave enough to go back down.
Yeah.
So many people just stay there blaming themselves for being wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and like that, I mean, that has implications on so many different levels. But yeah, it's true. We climb down, or like maybe even we get up there and we, I don't know, take what are those little wing things, sky gliders, whatever.
Zip line?
Sure, we'll do zip line. I was thinking the like, anyway,
gondola.
No, like okay, so you get up at the top.
We're on different mountains.
We're different mountains. Yeah. Hang gliding. That's
You're Wisconsin, I'm Maine.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, you might zip line back down to the bottom. Easy. Like it's easy for me to leave this behind, but now like you're stuck at the bottom and you're used to being on the top.
Yeah.
And that's part where the river of misery kicks in, because you're like, oh my gosh, I should be good at everything I try now.
All the comfort is up here. This is what I know how to do. You know, pretty much know what to expect. The paycheck is the same. The day-to-day is the same. That's comfort.
Yeah.
The other stuff is super uncomfortable because you don't know what tomorrow brings, and you don't know if you're going to have a paycheck, and you don't know if you're going to fail. I mean, you're probably going to fail. You're going to fail.
Yeah. Well, and the unknown is
your dream. There's going to be failure.
The unknown is terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of anxiety comes in, because we try to control what we cannot control. I mean, that's what anxiety boils down to in just about every scenario, is I can't control the thing that I want to be able to control. Right. But like when you don't know what to expect, what do?
Yeah. You get coached.
Right. You find somebody who can shake you out of it. No, well, but also like you find someone who's been there and who can leave you there, because I think that's another issue, is like so many people want to be fixers and they want to like pull you out of this negative feeling. Like, actually, I get really mad when people do that now, because I'm like, it'll be over in about a minute and a half. Like, please just let me be here. hold
room, hold space for me, please.
Yeah. Like, just let me feel for a minute. And not everybody needs that moment. But like, I have very clear emotional waves, and I like need to let the panic sink in for a second. And just like, I don't dissociate, but that's like the best analogy I have of like becoming the watcher of like, okay, we're going through this crazy tremulous, like, this doesn't feel good. Oh, okay, it's out.
Yeah,
we're done. Right.
And so many, and I do that too. I don't know if it's just like, because part of the job, people come to us as pharmacists with questions and they want, answers and help. And so it's so easy to quickly give an answer and quickly give my opinion or my solution, what I think is best. And not everybody wants that. Right. Not everybody wants you to fix their problems. They just want an ear. And so something we're working on.
Yeah. Something that one of my friends who at this point had gone through a lot of leadership training, and I think she was just using her skills on me. She started asking me if I wanted to be, or if I wanted her to listen, or if I wanted her help. I was like, ooh, that's a really good question. I'm going to start using that. Yes. And
how can I support you?
Exactly. Exactly. So if you have somebody that is in a state like we just described, it might be helpful to just ask that question. It might feel awkward at first until you kind of get used to it, but and they might not know if they're not used to being asked that question, but it might make them pause and think and like, okay, if I don't even know how I want to be supported right now, how can I expect somebody else to support me perfectly? Right. We need to learn to ask for what we need.
Sometimes when you're just venting, you are doing it to try to get to a solution.
Right.
If it's your friend or your mom or your sister, like it's been years and years of a relationship where you've just been each other's therapists and trying to fix each other's problems. And so, like sometimes having that little break in the conversation is like a little bit of a shock. And you're just like, whoa, wow, nobody's ever asked me that. But maybe that's what you need is to stop and think like, what do I want to get from this conversation? Like, what am I trying to get? Am I just venting?
Right.
Or do I actually want input and a solution? Because a lot of times, like, you don't really need it. You just need to get it out.
Right.
And just talk about it out loud.
Yeah.
I think that's most of what.
Yeah. And there's also, I will say that there have been some times where, well, one time in particular that I'm thinking of where I asked that of my spouse, and he said he would like us, or he'd like me to help. Like he wants me to help fix it, basically. And I was terrified for a second because he doesn't often ask this of me. And I default to like, I just need to be heard. And like, that's the support that I need because my brain can figure it out. Right. Like it's very egotistical like that. But, but yeah, he's like, I'm like, okay, do you want me to listen or do you want me to help? And, you know, he wanted my help, and it put me in a very, like, I was feeling very vulnerable because he was asking for my help. And it was this strange sort of like, I have a lot of solutions. I'm not used to giving them to him. And like, when he, like, this is where like releasing what the other person does, like not taking it personally, because when I was giving solutions, he was like kind of turning it to humor, which is kind of his default. And I known issue, not an issue most of the time, but like in this moment, I'm feeling particularly vulnerable and like, I feel like I'm being laughed at. And I'm like, this is not okay. But like, it was my own self-awareness that I was like, okay, this is not him trying to dismiss my solutions or anything like that. This is him feeling uncomfortable himself. And that's totally fine. I have to now hold space for him. Like we're on the next level of like, and this just gets deeper and deeper. Right. But it's like, if I had then taken offense to how he was responding to what I was saying, like that's where a lot of fights can happen. And I am so glad for the self-awareness that I have, and it has taken so much work to get here. But yeah, like being aware of how I'm feeling and not making it mean anything about him and vice versa is work worth doing, in my opinion.
Yeah. And not just with your spouse, when that's important work to do with your spouse.
Right.
With every other human to human interaction.
Right. Yeah. And this was just an example that I immediately came up with, but yeah, it applies to friends and workplace and, you know, every other scenario where you have somebody coming to you either to vent or to be heard or, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, we've all got our battles.
And yeah, I mean, I get into this too, where I just make a story about it.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the things that happened and then the pieces of it that I focused on. And then I recreate this whole story of what happened.
Right.
And make all these dramatizations about it and make it a bigger deal than it is. And then carry that into the next conversation that I have because the phone doesn't stop ringing.
Yep.
You know, and then that becomes something. And that's it's just like this
building
kerfuffle of like build up throughout the day. Great word.
It is a great word.
I don't know where it came from, and I don't really necessarily know what it means, but
well, I think you used it appropriately, so that's good. Anyway, yeah, I think it's important to, like, especially like in the workplace, if you've got calls and you've got people constantly coming up to you, and this is not unique to pharmacy, by the way, but whatever version of this happens, for you when people interrupt what you're doing. You have a phone call, you have a meeting, you have, whatever it is, and people are mad and blaming you for things that weren't actually your fault. And well, it's this other thing, but I can't explain that to you because you're so mad that whatever. Like, how do you flush that out before you take the next step to the next person?
Yeah. Because I don't want to be that person that's like kind of snappy on the other end.
Right.
And I just working in the setting that I'm in, like, I never want to be that person that is, yelling and screaming on the other line and being like the sassy representative that isn't helpful and
Right.
just doesn't want to be helping at
Right.
all.
And you can tell they're miserable.
You can tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person on the line that you can tell they don't want to be at their job.
Right.
So it's just, life is a lot.
It is. Yeah, I think I also think it's, I mean, so many things are important that we're saying here today, but I think it's important to like really think about who you want to be when you go places, when you show up for work, when you show up for whatever in life that you want to do, right? Like, who do I want to be in this moment? And sometimes who you actually want to be is a lot harder to be than the like
weird,
snappy, bitchy, like tell it like it
those
is.
Those things just come out.
Sometimes they do, for sure.
I mean,
and also like, yeah.
It's a lot easier to just fly off your like anger and frustrations than to take a deep breath and be like,
manage your
take
emotions
it personally.
Yeah.
Because most likely the person on the other line, they're not mad at me.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with me. It's
right.
Whatever's going on in their life. And I try to think of that too, like putting myself in other people's shoes. Like, how would I feel if my loved one was sick and they were worried about their medications and stuff?
Yeah.
It's all about that reframing.
Yeah. I like to think about like what emotions I want to bring with me in the scenario. So like most of the time, curiosity is sort of my default. Like if I'm going, like if it's somebody at work is doing something dumb, I perceive as dumb, I just don't understand it, right? Like, and you can go in frustrated and you can blame and shame and like, why are you doing this wrong? I've told you 1,000 times, blah, 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 blah. But like, if you go in with curiosity, how does that change the words that you say, right? How does it change your perception? And like true curiosity, not like, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
But like, hey, just curious, like, what's your thought process on what you're doing, or like whatever it is, right? It changes the whole dynamic of the energy that you bring to the room.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is the energy. I learned something yesterday from my PT therapist, PPF, pelvic floor therapist. I don't know what the abbreviation is. But kind of setting up like a meditation, breathing, whatever, thought work of just a bubble around yourself of like any energy that you don't want to be coming in and pulling from you, it just bounces off. So you just kind of do this little like force field around you, and then the emotions and energy that you want to come in with, you stay with that rather than letting other people, because I'm definitely that kind of person where like I have to check in and be aware, is this my emotion? Is this what I'm really feeling, or am I pulling from this other person?
Right.
Because I am very open that way, where like somebody else can get me upset when they're upset.
Right. And a lot of people have that open energy center, the open emotional center, where they are picking up things from everybody else, and you start to care a lot. And it feels like by not holding on to it, you're not caring.
Yeah.
But I like to describe it as more of a be a screen, not a sponge. The force field thing can be appropriate in certain circumstances, but I don't think it's as helpful as like, just let it pass through you.
Yeah.
Let the person in your front door, let the emotion go through your house and then right out the back door.
Yeah.
Right. Like
vitamin for tea and time to go.
Hey, glad you're here. Bye.
Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, so good to see you. But yeah, like we're not immune to feel. I think we are supposed to feel all of the emotions that life can bring to us, and resisting them is where the suffering happens. But yeah.
Or thinking it should be another way.
Right.
Yeah. Should be happy 100% of the time.
Thinking you shouldn't be anxious when you are, not helpful. Just add suffering and shame and blame to yourself. And then you're less likely to reach out to people who can help, or any coping mechanism that's actually helpful for you. Yeah.
Or not asking for help because you think you don't.
Right. Exactly. We're not about suppressing our emotions around here.
No.
And it's really hard to do. And it can be you can feel very vulnerable. Even if it's just you by yourself, it can be really hard.
Yeah. Especially like at work.
Yeah.
On your game.
Yep.
Yeah. Oof. This was a good one.
Yes. All right. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up for today? What advice do you have?
Assume that you're going to be happy 100% of the time.
Oh, for sure not. Assume that you won't be happy at least half of the time, no matter what.
Half. Yeah.
And
50.
that's not a bad thing.
No.
Happiness is not the goal all the time.
Because if you're happy all the time, how do you know what happy is?
Right.
Then
that's just normal.
Yeah. Then you're just dull.
Right. Yeah. Nobody, and it's fake because you can't possibly sustain that level of, feel goods all the time. No. And as I sometimes go by the rule of thirds instead of 50-50, where like a third of the time, literally the name of the rule, the thirds, a third of the time you will be feeling negative. A third of the time you'll be pretty neutral about the whole thing. And then a third of the time you'll be happy or in some sort of positive emotion, love, joy, any of those things. Yeah. But yeah, like expecting to
also
stay
not realistic to be happy and then crying.
Right.
Or, all of the time.
Yeah, you can be in all three of those in the exact same time and space. And I often I take my clients through like, can you find the spot in you that is calm right now? Yeah. Like, yeah, it's tiny, but it's there. Like, yeah,
it's in there somewhere.
It's still there. It's still there. Yeah. Awesome. All right.
Cool. All right. Well, you just helped me get into my next transition of life. So
excellent.
Thanks.
That's so good to hear. All right. Thanks for chatting with me today, Katie.
All righty. Thank you. Mm-hmm. See ya.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.